Professor, good morning.
Good morning.
You know what a motion in limine is, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What is it?
It's a pretrial motion to exclude evidence.
Okay. Do you know what the Dober, some say Dober doctrine is?
Yes, it's also it's a motion regarding the inclusion of certain forms of expert testimony.
Good. Does a federal judge ever make law?
No, that's not the role of a federal judge. The role of a federal judge is to apply the law as it exists and is found in the statutes and precedents.
How about, you're familiar with the Fourth Amendment? Is there a statute that says what reasonable is under the Fourth Amendment? Don't judges all the time have to determine what reasonable means? Isn't that making law?
Well, that is a determination that's made under law in applying the facts of a specific
Yeah, but
case,
don't
yes.
judges make law when they decide what reasonable means under the Fourth Amendment?
Well, they do in some sense make law. That's true. Justice Scalia once said, I'm not so naive to think judges don't make law, but they make law as though they are finding it.
So they do make law.
Well, in a sense, they decide cases and those become precedents.
All right, how about defining a restraint of trade?
Well,
I mean, is there a statute that tells us in every circumstance what restraint of trade is?
Well, the Sherman Antitrust Act is, one of the statutes that's referred to as a kind of common law statute where Congress has put forth a very general standard, and that's implemented by the courts.
Yeah, but don't federal judges all the time have to tell us what restraint of trade means? I mean, every case is not identical.
Yes, well, they have to make that determination.
So judges make law there too, don't they?
Well, in a sense, yes.
Okay. If you've got an ambiguous statute, do you think the president's opinion about the meaning of that statute is part of the legislative history?
The president who signed that statute, or the
Right,
president?
he can sign it or veto it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that it is in a sense part of the legislative history, but I think in general when interpreting a statute, it's best to focus on the text.
But do you think you should ignore what the president thought about it?
Well, I think, a court needs to consider the evidence that the parties put forward, and sometimes that includes legislative history or the opinion of the president.
Sorry to cut you off. I just don't have much time. Do you think that what the president thinks about a statute, the meaning of it, is part of the legislative history?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's suppose Congress passes a statute. It says, I'm going to read it slowly. I just made this up, okay? No person convicted of rape in any court can work in a battered women's shelter. No person convicted of rape in any court can work in a battered women's shelter. Now, the legislative history makes it very clear that in any court means a United States court. And someone is convicted of rape in a court in, let's say, Turkmenistan. What controls? Legislative history or the plain meaning of the statute?
Well, I think that the Supreme Court has made clear that where the statute is clear, that's the end of the inquiry. And in your example, the statute says any court.
So you would rule in any court?
Well, I think the part of the question would be also to look at the structure of the statute and the surrounding text to see whether any also included, for instance, foreign jurisdictions.
But under the plain meaning doctrine, and if you're an originalist, you don't look beyond the statute. It says in any court.
But there is sometimes a question of whether that has extraterritorial application, for instance.
No, it says in any court. It means any court.
Well, any usually is pretty...
Even though Congress intended it just to mean... I mean, is that a case where you would ignore the legislative history and just go with the plain meaning of the statute, even though Congress obviously intended otherwise?
Well, I think if looking in the four corners of the statute and considering its structure and the other related provisions and looking at that, if it seemed clear, then there would be no need to have recourse to the legislative history because this text is what Congress enacted after all.
All right, okay. What is your, this is my last question, Mr. Chairman. What is your personal definition of life? When does life begin, in your personal opinion?
Senator, that is it's a difficult question, and it's one that's the subject of ongoing political disputes.
No, I'm not asking legally, I'm just
and,
asking you personally.
I guess I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. As a judicial nominee, I hesitate
Why
to
don't you
comment
just
on an
answer it
issue.
for me honestly? Have you thought about it?
I have thought about it, yes, but it's the type of issue that is related to cases that could be pending before the court if I'm confirmed, and under the code of conduct, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to
Well,
comment on that.
let me suggest an answer to you. It doesn't matter as a judge. You're supposed to follow the law.
Well, of course, Senator. My personal views, to the extent I have any, are put to one side.
And that's the point. I'm trying to rush through this, but others went over. We have nominees come before us all the time, and they're beat up for their past written opinions and their past law review articles and the past things they've said. I don't want a nominee that's never thought about the world. I'd prefer to have a nominee that has an intellect above a single-cell organism, that doesn't come in here as a blank slate. The issue is not have you thought about the world. The issue is, were you willing to put aside your personal beliefs and follow the law? So are you willing to put aside your personal beliefs and follow the law?
Absolutely.
Even if you disagree with the law?
Absolutely. That's the job of a judge.
Are you willing to rule in an abortion case in a way as dictated by the law, even if it contradicts your personal opinions about when life begins?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.